In a world where nothing is what it seems. Sometimes, you just need to take a step back and take a second look. Discover the weird, quaint, and downright bizarre. It's time to rethink. Forced perspective. Hey, it's a giant, and it's trying to lean on that building. No, wait. It's trying to grab that statue. And that one's lifting people with his hand. And what's that other one doing? At a quick glance, there's something quite peculiar about these scenes and images. I mean, now that you have time to process it, you know that it's just another case of an optical illusion, messing with your perception. It's the optical illusion called forced perspective. But what is forced perspective? Well, to understand it, let's take a look at how we perceive objects and in depth. Observe a busy street. As objects like cars and people move farther away from your vantage point, they appear smaller. And conversely, when objects are nearer, they appear bigger. Or when you're in the plane, notice how buildings, roads, and people appear smaller as the plane ascends. Using this knowledge, forced perspective can be used as a technique to make objects appear bigger or smaller. You'll often find this technique used in photography, cinematography, and architecture. And it's not just moving objects farther and closer. Sometimes, manipulating an object's size, shape, and length can also add to the illusion of forced perspective. Examine this scene. A room where two people, a giant and a normal-sized person, exchange places. And voila! As they move along the room, their height changes. But how? This is a classic example of the Ames room illusion. A room specially designed to have its architecture mess with your sense of perspective. Look at how it's actually designed. The rightmost end is actually more compressed and farther than the leftmost end. Because of this, moving across the room creates the illusion that people grow taller. Another famous example would be the Japanese style of monster and mecha genre movies, where miniature building sets are shot with actors wearing a monster costume. This results to the monster appearing as if it was as tall as the buildings. In a lot of movies, featuring destroyed cities struck by calamity or what have you, miniature sets are used. Then, the cameras and lenses are brought really close to make it seem as if the sets were as big in real life. They do it with mountains, castles, spaceships, planes, boats, and others. In fact, before the use of computers, most big-budget movies employed this technique a lot. The technique can also be observed in video games, especially those involving race cars. Notice that in most racing games, the car actually never moves and stays at the center of the frame, while only the scenery or background changes. and the objects in the background, like trees and signages, suddenly change sizes to create the illusion of depth and movement. So, want to try your hand at forced perspective? It's as easy as grabbing a camera or even your phone. First, pick a scene to set up and have someone model for you. Now, ask your model to move forward and backward and use your viewfinder or screen to adjust as necessary. Then, at just the right angle, tell them to hold still, pose, and snap away. See how many fun scenes you can come up with. Living dough. Now take a look at this setup for a second. It's a thick liquid sitting on top of a bowl. Well, it's actually a speaker that's holding up the liquid. That's pretty weird, right? Well, observe as we start to introduce sound. Now, look at the liquid. Watch as we open a dimensional portal that summons creatures from the other side. Or no. Here it is with some food coloring. Here's another one. Now that's trippy. So how did the liquid move like that with a sound? Well, what you saw was an example of a non-Newtonian fluid. It is a fluid that behaves differently from conventional or Newtonian fluids. Newtonian fluids have a shear stress and shear rate that is linear. You'll observe this whenever you pour Newtonian liquids. They have a viscosity that slides proportionally, so to speak. For a quick example, we can take a look at good old-fashioned water. To illustrate, go ahead and grab any container of water. Any clear container will do. Now tilt the container. And we'll look at how water freely flows as it spills. That's how Newtonian liquids behave. Now go on and clean that mess. Now let's look at the non-Newtonian variety. The viscosity of non-Newtonian liquids differ with shear stress. It means they have a different way of flowing in its liquid state. Some examples of non-Newtonian liquids are toothpaste and ketchup. This particular non-Newtonian fluid, however, is actually known as an oobleck, which is just a fancy name for water and starch mix. Now, you probably tried this experiment back in grade school. Remember the water-starch mix experiment? When you mix water and starch together, notice how they form a thick liquid. Now try applying shear stress to the liquid. Observe how, in that instance, the liquid seems hard. Now try grabbing onto it and see how it flows through your fingers, just like liquids do. Try rolling it into a ball, and given enough pressure, it will stay solid for a short time. Once you release the pressure, the thing just flows through your fingers. That's non-Newtonian fluids in action. Now back to our effect. Remember that sound is energy caused by vibrations. Let's see how this energy translates when it encounters our non-Newtonian liquid. Of course, in doing this experiment, don't forget to protect your speaker by using a plastic wrap to keep the liquid stuff away from the speakers. Right now, we're using an app to generate sound using different frequencies. Now observe how the oobleck behaves with high and low frequency sounds. You can even try playing your favorite tunes on the speaker. At the right frequencies, you'll see that the oobleck dances and forms towering masses. However, once the sound source is cut, the oobleck goes back to a soupy liquid consistency. Now for an added twist. Check out the oobleck with some food coloring. That kinda looks like a creature, eh? So, if you have some time, some water, starch, coloring, and an extra speaker to spare, try it out for yourself. Infinity mirror. Have you ever thought about infinity? A special property usually assigned to numbers. Stretching outward, unlimited, countless. Now imagine what it would look like. The thought conjures images of parallel worlds and multiple dimensions. Observe. Now you've probably seen this before. Maybe in a bathroom stall, an elevator perhaps, at the dressing room, or at the salon. Now remember what these places have in common. Well, as you've probably guessed, it has something to do with mirrors. Well, mirrors basically work by reflecting light. Remember, our eyes see because of the light waves that is reflected back to our eyes. Colors, brightness, and darkness are all consequences of this phenomena. Now, reflective surfaces have a smooth enough surface that allows light from one angle to be reflected. And since light waves travel so fast, the reflection seems instantaneous to our human perception. Now, when you put another mirror in front of a mirror and place them parallel with both reflective surfaces facing each other, this creates a reflection of a reflection. Think of it as an echo. Sound bouncing off walls creates trails of slightly lower echoes of the same sound. Only this time, instead of sound, light is reflected. When light is reflected from one mirror, it bounces from the surface of the first mirror and travels the distance to the opposite mirror. Theoretically, this light will go down and bounce back and forth to infinity. Now, as the light bounces back and forth, it still has to travel the distance to and from the opposite sides of the mirror, making each successive reflection seem farther than the last. Now consider this. A 2 cm thick infinity mirror with an object halfway in between. Light has to travel 1 centimeter to one surface, then 2 centimeters back to the surface of the other mirror, then 4 centimeters back to the first surface, and so on. You'll notice that the distance traveled by the light also appears to be the distance of the reflections in the mirror. This creates the cascading or tunneling effect, which we can observe in the infinity mirror setup. An infinite progression of reflection, each fractionally smaller than the first, making it appear as if the reflections stand infinitely through an infinitely far distance. Here's another one. Check out this example. Now let's take it a step further. You'll be needing a camcorder. A phone or webcam will do. you'll also be needing a separate screen or monitor. Try placing an object with a screen as its background. Now go ahead and point your camera to that object. Notice how the background and the screen appears to be infinite? The same principles are at work here, with light infinitely reflecting back and forth, only this time the screen and the lens of your camera. Notice how if you slightly move the object, the reflections in the background starts to move one by one. That's because not only does light need to travel back and forth, there's also a short delay, with the signal of the camera having to travel from the lens, the processor, and eventually the screen. Of course, infinite mirrors has its applications as well. Designers often employ infinite mirrors to make rooms appear bigger than they are. It's also used as an effect to make a wormhole tunneling effect for objects, such as tables, blocks, and even frames. Bed of nails. Okay, this one is a classic. Let's go back again to a different time and a different place. Picture a man deep in concentration. It's as if he's in a trance-like state. Not really awake, but not really sleepy either. That looks like a nice bed. Oh, it's a bed of nails. Really, that's a lot of nails. And the man just lies there as if it was nothing? It looks like it should hurt though. What you saw was the classic bed of nails act, where a bed of nails, a long rectangular piece of wood, is adorned with who knows how many nails across the surface. But that's not all. This bed was designed for a person to lie down on it. To the spectator, it may seem that the bed is a hazard waiting to happen. How could anybody risk injury for such a trick? There's also a popular variation to the trick, where a cinder block or a slab of concrete is placed on top of the performer, while he lies across the bed of nails. Then, the concrete is broken with a sledgehammer, and the performer lives to talk about it another day. So what's the trick behind this feat? Well, let's scale things down with this simple experiment. Nails are inherently sharp. They're used to wedge things together, right? So with a small pointy edge, everybody knows that with enough force, the nails will puncture through a soft medium, such as skin. Did you ever in your life step on a thumbtack by accident? Those who did know what we're talking about. Now imagine, this balloon is your skin. Place a balloon on top of the nail, and with little force, the nail will puncture the balloon. That's precisely what would happen if you stepped on a single nail, much less lie down over it. Don't do it. Seriously. But as you increase the number of nails, observe how this balloon reacts to this bed with multiple nails. Now watch as we put some weight over the balloon. So how does the balloon not get punctured by the nails? Well, it's because the balloon and the weight on top is supported not under one sharp point, but with many tiny points holding it up. Thus, the weight is evenly distributed among the nails in the bed. It's the same principle behind the bed of nails trick. So a person's weight can safely be distributed among the thousands of nails across the board. Imagine if it was just one nail. A person weighing 100 pounds would have his weight rest on one point. But if the bed contained, let's say, 2,000 nails, each nail would only need to hold up 0.05 pounds of weight, and again is more than enough to support a person. But what about the part where concrete is broken over the performer's body? Well, not only do the nails distribute weight load, but it also distributes the force of the blow to the concrete slab. This means that the force from the impact is considerably lessened for the performer at the receiving end of the strike. But it goes without saying, do not try this trick at home without proper safety precautions and anybody to assist you. If you want to experience the bed of nails, go to a local science museum and look for the bed of nails machine. A machine where you can lie down and wait for nails to simply come out from underneath safely. Now, this episode would not be complete without a quick discussion on some notable rethinkers. People who are responsible for giving us these mind-boggling illusions and tricks. Today's featured rethinker is... Wait, there are actually two featured for today's episode. Let's take a look at the works of filmmakers Marion C. Cooper and Ishiro Honda. Both are known for their work on giant monster movies that have become synonymous with the kaiju genre. As we all know, the kaiju genre is one of the most notable film genres to feature one such optical trick, the forced perspective illusion. Marion Cooper was born in October 24 of 1893 in Jacksonville, Florida, pursuing a career as a writer in the 1920s. During the decade, Cooper would start working on King Kong, a character that he created based on a dream he had about a giant gorilla that was terrorizing New York. The idea was pitched in the 1930s, and filming began shortly and was released in 1933, becoming an instant classic that defined the genre. Meet filmmaker Ishiro Honda from Japan. Ishiro was born in 1911 in Asahi, Yamagata. Ishiro Honda started his filmmaking career working as an assistant alongside famed Japanese director Akira Kurosawa. With the world having seen the devastating effects of nuclear weapons, Honda created Gojira, a combination of the Japanese words the gorilla or gorilla and the Kojira or whale, better known as Godzilla. The world first saw the creature film come to life during the 1950s, and today has appeared in more than 30 feature films. Well, it's the end of the line for this episode. But don't worry, there will be more. Be sure to tune in next time for more tricks and illusions, as we give you another mind-boggling dose of Rethink.